Chapter 11. The Last Taboo, Drinking and Pregnancy. This may be the most stigmatized area of a very stigmatized subject. Janet Christie. Is it safe to drink while you're pregnant? When I was pregnant with Nicholas, the commonly accepted answer was no. But in recent years, with equal certainty, science has given women three definitive answers: no, yes, and maybe. In 2010, a widely reported British study stated that the children of mothers who drank small amounts of alcohol during their pregnancy were not at an increased risk for behavioral or intellectual developmental problems. The study, which was published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, went further, saying that children of light drinkers were 30% less likely to have behavioral problems than children whose mothers were abstinent during pregnancy. The study also reported that children of light drinkers achieved higher cognitive scores than those whose mothers had abstained. I remember being outraged by the study and its success in undermining years of messaging on the risk of alcohol to the developing fetus. I wasn't alone, but the comments sections of newspapers were filled with this sort of response. My mother drank when she was pregnant with me, and I turned out just fine. I intend to do the same thing. To which others responded, yes, look how you turned out, irresponsible and brain damaged. It went on, page after page of jousting. Clearly, this hit a nerve. I turned to Sterling Claren, CEO of the Canada Northwest Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, FASD, Research Network, and one of the world's leading researchers on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. He is measured in his reaction. The UK study was unfortunate. Saying that you can have one or two is too simple. What if a woman drank before she knew she was pregnant, say a glass of champagne on her birthday? Obstetricians are confronted with this kind of question all the time, says Claren. Drilling down is important. Was it really just one glass or half a bottle? How big was the glass? I have 3 kinds of champagne glasses at home. He continues, was that really the only time you drank? Are you 5'9" and heavy or a small woman? The only ones who really know exactly what they drank are the beer drinkers, because today no one drinks standard drinks. Precision in drinking? That's not how the world works. In the end, says Claren, all we can tell a woman is whether she is at high, medium, or low risk, and she can make it lower if she doesn't drink anymore. The reality is there is a relative risk to drinking. What if the woman's answer is different? Voluminous amounts in early pregnancy, once or twice a week? That doesn't translate to 100% risk. 50% risk is more likely. Women want to know what low risk is. They're asking for a simple, fair discussion of this. According to Claren, there is a complicated formula for dose and effect involving how much was consumed, the timing in pregnancy, and a host of other factors: the mother's genes, the fetus's genes, whether the mother smokes, her potential vitamin deficiencies, and so on. It's a complicated formula, and we don't know how to fill it in. I doubt we ever will. And when we talk about risk, the question is, risk for what? For massive malformations of the brain? For blindness? For diminished executive functioning? A mild brain disorder? No one knows the answer. So what about that glass of wine on your birthday? Of course you can have it. You're taking a risk, a very small risk. A true small amount on a rare occasion is not very risky. He pauses. But I don't know what rare is, and I don't know what small is. How much mercury is safe for the fetus? Raw cheese? We just say, avoid it. The advice is the same with alcohol because we just don't know. Canadian expert Nancy Poole, well known for her collaborative work on FASD-related research and her work with women, acknowledges that many want black and white answers. Unfortunately, says Poole, the territory is gray. To represent the risk accurately for a wide range of women, I like to say simply that it's safest not to drink in pregnancy. We need to balance the knowledge that alcohol is a teratogen and that one drink is unlikely to cause harm. Poole believes that there is a stumbling block in doctors' offices. When you scratch the surface, yes, they are asking the question, you're not drinking, are you? But many physicians don't know what to do when the answer is yes. Obviously, there is great stigma around drinking in pregnancy. Many women with a substance use issue are afraid to admit to having a problem for fear their child or children will be apprehended by a child welfare agency. Should they want help, there are challenges. Most treatment centers do not accommodate children or modify programs for pregnant women. Meanwhile, with a larger number of women drinking at risky levels, many developed countries are facing an epidemiological perfect storm. 62% of the babies in Canada are born to women between the ages of 25 and 34, the group demonstrating the fastest growth in risky drinking. The next youngest age range is drinking off the charts, according to Gerald Thomas, a senior researcher with the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse located in Ottawa. They're living the culture, drinking hard. These women may quit drinking once they know they are pregnant, but a great deal of damage can happen in the weeks before pregnancy is confirmed. Says Thomas, the costs associated with FAS, a lifetime disability, are massive. It has been roughly 40 years since fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS, was first described as a clinical diagnosis, and it is widely accepted as the leading developmental disorder in the world. It is the primary cause of mental deficiencies in developed countries. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD, is an umbrella term that encompasses 4 lifelong conditions including FAS, partial FAS, alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder, ARND, and alcohol-related birth defects, ARBD. All are preventable and are caused by prenatal exposure to alcohol. FASD is associated with a broad array of physical defects, cognitive, behavioral, emotional, and adaptive functioning deficits, congenital anomalies, such as malformations of the cardiac, skeletal, renal, ocular, and auditory systems, among others. Full-blown FAS and partial FAS, typically 1 case of the first for every 4 cases of the second, are marked by a set of physical conditions, with partial FAS having a subset of those fully observed in FAS. These include a flattening of the middle groove between the nose and the upper lip, known as the philtrum, a thin upper lip, small eye openings, droopy eyelids, a wide distance between the 2 inner eyelids, a small head. The more severely affected the facial features, the more severe the brain effects. Alcohol-related birth defects relates to the damaging teratogenic effects that alcohol can have on developing cells and organs. Alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder is typically referred to as an invisible disability without the distinctive dysmorphic face and classic growth deficiency. It is represented by a complex pattern of behavioral or cognitive abnormalities. The consequences of FASD are diverse, affecting individuals, their families, and their communities in a broad way. People with FASD may have significant issues with memory, attention, decision-making, and self-care. They may have problems with organization, completing tasks, controlling their emotions. These impairments are also accompanied by complex and highly detrimental health conditions. Without crucial support, those affected by FASD are at high risk of developing such secondary disabilities as mental health problems or alcohol or drug issues. They may have difficulty with the law, school, employment, and homelessness. There is no amount of alcohol that has been proven to be safe during pregnancy, says Svetlana Popova, a senior scientist at Toronto's Centre for Addiction and Mental Health and one of 3 leading investigators on a 12-country international study on the prevalence of FASD. Even half a glass of wine can be damaging to a fetus. It could damage any one of a number of organs or the central nervous system. 22 years ago, Lynn Cunningham's stepdaughter gave birth to Andrew, a child with FAS. When he was 18 months old, Cunningham and her husband took the boy into their home. He was the child who would not turn off, says the Toronto writer and professor. Andrew was indefatigable and would bounce around creating messes wherever he went. He would do things that even little kids knew not to do, jump in puddles near laundry. All the clothes were marked by mud. It didn't extend to doing extremely dangerous things. He wasn't a darter into traffic, but he didn't have a sense of caution. He used to fly into rages and rants. She called him Tornado Andrew. Today, he is enrolled in a music production course at community college, an extraordinary success story for someone born with FAS. He's living on his own. He's not in jail. Still, he counts on Cunningham for a great deal, including a weekday wake-up call. According to Cunningham, conventional wisdom says that those with the syndrome operate at 2/3 their chronological age. That will put her close to 80 by the time he will be functioning as a 25-year-old. The issue is he relies on me for a lot of stuff. Am I going to be able to do this for him as long as he needs me? Common logic says that the worries troubling Cunningham will be shared by a growing number of women if you consider the growth in risky drinking. As she wrote in a magazine memoir, the perception that FAS is largely confined to the indigenous population is an enduring fallacy. Jan Lutke agrees. The Vancouver mother has adopted 25 children, 16 with a diagnosis, 10 of whom still live with her. She is well seasoned in the disability and its many ramifications. Says Lutke, if you're white, you're ADHD. If you're not, you're FASD. If you look at an Aboriginal kid, it's the first thing people think of. If you look at a Caucasian kid, it's the last thing people think of, as if skin color protects you from the effects of alcohol. We think this disability only affects the disenfranchised or the poor. This is not an us or them issue, it's an us issue. Looking at the results of 3 studies, one might conclude that the older, educated, professional woman is more likely to drink during her pregnancy than her younger, less educated counterparts. Perhaps not surprisingly, the numbers out of the United Kingdom are high. A recent report indicated that of those who drank before they conceived, 55% drank when they were pregnant. Those most likely to drink included women aged 35 and older, 61%, compared with those under 20, 47%. Last year, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, reported that 1 in 13 American pregnant women said that they drank, with the highest prevalence for those aged 35 to 44, 14%, white, 8%, college-educated, 10%, or employed, 9%. Pregnant women who were employed were nearly 2.5 times more likely to engage in binge drinking than their unemployed counterparts. Women who were binging reported doing so an average of 3 times a month, consuming 6 drinks per episode. Meanwhile, a 2012 study in Australia reported that 47% of women consumed alcohol while pregnant before their pregnancy was confirmed, and 19.5% consumed alcohol while pregnant, knowing they were so. Older women with a higher household income were more likely to drink after they learned they were pregnant. 90% of drinkers under 25 quit drinking once their pregnancy was confirmed, whereas only half of those aged 36 or older did the same. Says American scientist Philip May, arguably the leading researcher on FASD prevalence, how do you get over the middle and upper class arrogance around FASD? I can have 3 or 4 glasses of wine a week and my child will be fine. These are lower class problems. They are the ones with public health problems. And they likely will be fine, too. Their children will have an IQ of 100. They may have a menial labor job when they could have been an engineer. Currently appointed as a research professor at the Gillings School of Global Public Health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, May says that both FAS and FASD are more prevalent than previously estimated. Roughly 2 to 7 children per 1,000 have fetal alcohol syndrome in North America and Europe, and 2 to 5% have FASD. In the United States, Canada, and especially Europe, between 15 and 30% of all kids have been exposed to a significant amount of alcohol as fetuses. They may be born normal or close to normal, but who's to say if they would have been geniuses had they not been exposed? The moderately exposed kids might have adequate nutrition, stimulation, and education, so for many aspects of life they may perform in the normal range. It may show up in poor judgment, an inability to do math, or more complex tasks of reasoning. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia and the United Kingdom, up to 20% of mothers are drinking at very high levels in the first trimester, and many are drinking at levels higher than they report. I can tell you, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and fetal alcohol syndrome are far more common than I ever dreamed they would be. If you look at special populations, the numbers of those with FASD are high. In the United States, up to 35% of adoptees have been reported to have FASD, the majority being from Eastern Europe. In Sweden, up to 30% of adoptees from Eastern Europe are reported to have FAS. The proportion of those with FASD in correctional systems is also very high, up to 23% in Canada. One of the keys to this story is delayed pregnancy recognition. You can ask a woman if she drank during a particular pregnancy and she will say, "I quit as soon as I had a positive test." Much can happen before that pregnancy confirmation. According to May, many children may not reach their full potential. A lot can happen in the 8th, 10th, 12th week. That exposure seems to lead to cognitive and behavioral problems. There are all sorts of epigenetic reactions that we don't understand. If a man drinks heavily, he can have abnormal sperm. A kid can get a deficit from both sides. Personally, I'm fond of Jody Allen Crow's initiative, installing pregnancy test dispensers in bars. Last summer, the founder of Healthy Brains for Children placed a dispenser in the women's washroom at Pub 500 in Mankato, a college town in southern Minnesota. For $3, a woman could find out if the drink she was about to order was a good idea or not. Smart innovation. So too is the labeling of liquor bottles. But May is skeptical. Bottle labels have a minimal effect, for light drinkers. If women are already drinking, it means nothing. But the next generation? They will grow up knowing that alcohol and pregnancy don't mix. It's just like seatbelts. Seatbelts save lives. We accept this now. They will know that you should stop drinking before you try to conceive. According to Popova, more than 50% of pregnancies are unplanned in the developed world, and closer to 70 or 80% in some countries in the developing world. She says that 5 years ago, we believed that drinking during the first and last trimesters of pregnancy was the most harmful. The most recent evidence from animal studies demonstrates that the fetus is vulnerable to alcohol at all stages. She adds that women should abstain from drinking during breastfeeding. Alcohol consumed by the mother passes easily into her breast milk at concentrations similar to that in her bloodstream. Therefore, alcohol goes directly to the baby, which might result in impaired mental and motor development, changes in sleep patterns, and growth deficits. FASD is largely preventable. What woman wants to damage her child? Unfortunately, the public tends to stick with ideas that they like, or are convenient. As part of the international study guided by the World Health Organization on the global prevalence of FASD, Popova will be leading a school study of 8,000 children aged 7 to 9 in the Greater Toronto area of Canada. The research team will identify those children who have growth deficits, learning disabilities, and behavioral problems. These children will then have a dysmorphology assessment, measuring their facial features. They will also undergo psychological and developmental testing. Their biological mothers will be asked about nutrition, stress, alcohol, and tobacco use during their pregnancy with their children in the study. If a mother does not confirm she consumed alcohol during her pregnancy, those assessing her child will not be able to assign an FASD diagnosis, no matter how obvious the case. The hurdles are immense. Sarah Matson, who is Associate Director of the Center for Behavioral Teratology at San Diego State University, focuses on better ways to determine whether certain children were exposed to alcohol as fetuses. She and her team look at adopted children or children in foster care, ones for whom there is a social worker's report or some other confirmation that the birth mother used alcohol while pregnant. We do a slew of neuropsychological testing to find out what the child's deficits are. We are looking for a marker that says if the child has X, Y, and Z, he has a high chance of having been exposed to alcohol. With every study, we're getting a little bit closer to finding one. I ask Matson, does she believe there are children in the school system who are labeled learning disabled who actually have FASD? I am sure there are kids who are not being recognized, she says. Absolutely. Having the facial features is not important. The exposure to alcohol is, and whether they show similar behavioral and cognitive features.